I had a migraine for 3 years straight, no days off, that landed me in the hospital for 3 months, 10 years later. Let's talk about it. So when I was 17, I was healthy. I was a senior in high school, and I was pretty athletic. For me, we were playing volleyball against another school. I was a senior at this time, obviously, so this was my last volleyball season, and all of a sudden I wasn't playing well. I never got hit in the head, nothing happened, but my coach took me out because I wasn't playing well, and I sat on the bench, and all of a sudden I felt this like really weird itch on my nose. So I went like this, and then all this blood started pouring out of my nose like nonstop. I remember running to the bathroom, like, not to get too graphic, but I was like spitting it into the sink because it was so fast. I had literally never ever had a nosebleed like this, and so everyone was freaking out. My mom ran in after me, another friend's mom ran in too, and we could not get it to stop for about 30 minutes. And then after those 30 minutes, when it stopped, I felt the sharp pain go up my nostril into my brain. And so I went home, obviously, and all I wanted to do was go back to sleep. And my mom was like, "Nope, Sydney, stay with us, stay with me. I'm calling your dad. He's on his way home from work, and we're going to take you to the ER." So when my dad got home, he shined a light into my eyes, and I was photophobic, meaning that my pupils weren't changing, I believe. So he was like, "Yes, we need to go right now to the ER." So we did, and they did all different tests on me, trying to figure out if I had a brain tumor or what was going on. And turns out I didn't have a brain tumor, which was good. All they said was, "Oh, you have a migraine. Here's some Tylenol. Go home, take a rest. It'll be gone tomorrow." And, I had a weird feeling that that was not the case. But I went home and did that anyways. And then a week later, still there. Got worse. I could not stand the ice maker. I was crying like all the time after like all sharp noises, like super loud sharp noises, or like a lot of sunlight. Like, I just could not get out of bed. I was sleeping a lot. My mom thought I was depressed, which was not the case. And so she was pretty upset, like seeing me sleep so much and trying to get me out of bed when I really couldn't get out of bed. I started to see a neurologist, and when I did that, I landed into the ER a few more times, and they tried to do a migraine cocktail of, I don't remember what exactly, except for triptans. And triptans are migraine medication that helps break it. But instead of helping it break my crazy migraine that I had now had for at least a month or so, my chest closed. It felt like someone was like sitting on my chest. My headache or my migraine got worse as like the medicine kicked in, and then I was even worse off. And I just remember saying, "I'm never taking this again. Don't make me take this." And my doctor said, "Okay, we're just going to try it one more time, but maybe it'll be better when you take it at home orally instead of in the IV." So we got home. I did that same reaction. It was torture for hours in the middle of the night. And obviously that was not very successful. So my doctor tried so many different medications and nothing was working. This was about, I want to say 3 months in, so probably at the end of winter into spring, I want to say, something like that, end of winter-ish. And so he ended up putting me on Adderall because I could not stay awake, thinking that would help me. I tried different other medicines, like he was almost done. He didn't have many more choices for me. And by the time spring came around, he said, "Look, I'm not sure really like what to do other than to send you off to a headache clinic in another state." So I got on the list for that headache clinic. It was a pretty long wait list. And I'm talking months. And so I was here struggling, still with the migraine. I remember my mom sat me down with my pediatrician and said, look, Sydney, you have to go back to school. We know you don't feel well. It's a headache. It'll go away. And I just remember breaking down, crying so much because they did not understand that this was just not a migraine. This was something much bigger. So I went back to school, and I just remember the one day that I went back, like, I had my head down. I could not like keep up with the class or like anything. Like, I could not listen, focus, whatever. So then I drove myself back home, and I remember like the sunlight was in between some of the trees because I drove through like some woods, and I was so nauseous. I was gonna throw up, and it was so awful. So I really didn't go back to school after that, other than I'm trying to remember if I went back to take maybe a couple of tests and try to do an assignment, and they were nice enough to still let me graduate because I had really good grades and I was always a really good student. So in June of 2015, I graduated high school, and then right after that, we ended up going to the headache clinic in a different state, and we had to wait a few days when we were there, and it was a really weird hotel stay, but we're not going to get into that right now. But then they finally got me in, and so they started throwing different medications at me again, like trying to see if any of them would work. I did get a couple spinal taps, and I did that previously too on my ER trips. And one of my ER trips, I had been poked several times because they couldn't figure out where to go, and it ended up causing a leak in my spine of CSF fluid. And when that happens, you get the absolute worst migraine you've ever had in your entire life. You don't even think that something like this can exist. And so the only way to patch it up was like a blood patch or drinking caffeine or getting IV caffeine. And I drank so much caffeine. I was trying everything. And I ended up having to go back and get, I don't remember what, because they ran out of caffeine, maybe a blood patch or something. So it ended up working out, and it went back to my terrible migraine that I was used to. And then from then on, they were doing my spinal taps through interventional radiology, where they could see like an ultrasound x-ray-ish type thing and see where to put like the huge needle. The needle, if you've like had a baby or whatever, it's like an epidural sort of, in that size needle or bigger, I don't remember. But anyways, going back to Michigan when they were doing my spinal tap, I was obviously very scared there too, but they ended up doing a good job with that. And I think I was there for about like 2 weeks, and then they decided to diagnose me with this thing called pseudotumor cerebri. It ended up being the complete wrong diagnosis, but you'll find out as time goes on. And they had me go home on 32 pills a day of different things like diuretics, which means it just drains the fluid out of you, because the pseudotumor cerebri is like, it's a condition where your brain thinks it has a tumor, sort of, and so it fills up with fluid, and they were trying to drain the fluid out of my brain, which I obviously did not have. And so it was summertime. I was getting ready to go to college. I begged to go to college far away, and I did. I went to college 1,000 miles away while I'm this sick, And I was like, no, you can't stop me. I'm going. I don't care. I don't care how much pain I'm in. I don't care. I want to start my life over again. This is going to be great. I might struggle, but it's life. So I did go back down to school in Florida, actually. And so I made some amazing friends. My first year was really pretty good. Obviously, I wasn't feeling well. I still had that migraine. It did calm down like a little bit, but I was always super, super lethargic and tired, and I had to take naps in between my classes, and I tried not to like put a strenuous load on my first like semester or two. So yeah, I really enjoyed my first year, and I pushed myself, and I tried to socialize as much as I could, and it ended up being a really happy place for me. Sophomore year, or excuse me, in between freshman year and sophomore year, my mom had to come down and help me move out because I couldn't do that much work myself, or pretty much not at all. So she helped me with that, and I went up back to where I live for the summer. I ended up going into the ER once because I had some stomach issue, and you have to like stay hydrated with the medications I was on, and they wouldn't let me have anything because they thought my appendix burst, which it didn't, and they were trying to get me ready for surgery. And so by the time I was able to have fluids again, because they realized my appendix was fine, I was throwing up because I drank so fast because I was so thirsty from my medications. And that was a pretty miserable night, I'm not gonna lie. But the rest of the summer, as far as I remember, was okay. Sophomore year comes around. I'm excited to go back down 1,000 miles away, see all my friends again, start an exciting next year, and I do. And the fall semester was okay. I ended up rushing for a sorority. They don't like the word rushing, but whatever. And during that time, not only was I sick with this headache, I ended up getting a walking pneumonia, and I was trying to like go to all these meetings. I was trying to like get myself into a specific sorority that I really wanted to be in, and I was like coughing. It was terrible. I had to beg them to let me to bring in like water or something so I don't cough the entire time. And then when I got into my sorority and you run home, I was trying to run home on walking pneumonia. So that was very interesting. People were laughing because I was like last with my friend who ran with me, and I couldn't run basically because it was so bad. I had freaking pneumonia. But after that semester was okay. I was dropping a lot of weight, and I was so happy about that because I did gain some weight from whatever was going on, and so I was happy to see myself lose this weight, but it started to get to a level where it looked pretty scary, and you could tell I was very sick. So at the end of the fall semester, I was still doing okay. And then winter rolls around, we go back to college, and still sophomore. And all of the sudden, I want to say around February-ish, March, somewhere around there, I get this really weird rash on my tongue. And at this point, I'm like, this is strange. My tongue has never been all white before. And it started to really hurt to the point where I could not eat. I could not swallow because my throat hurt and my chest hurt on top of my tongue also. And so I had to go to the like urgent care or whatever. And I ended up having a thing called thrush, which I had never heard of before. And while I was there, they noticed that my heart rate was extremely high. I don't remember exactly what it was, But it was to the point where they called my dad and they told him, we need to get her to the hospital as soon as possible. That rhymed. And we have to call an ambulance. So my dad, I remember he called me and told me what was going on, and I could hear the ambulance in the background, and I was pleading and begging. I was like, please just let me drive there. I'm okay. I can drive. Don't worry. Like, I don't want to leave my car here. And they were like, no, you have to go. Like, you have to go. So I did. This was my first ever ambulance ride. I was by myself. I was by myself when I was in the hospital for a while. And they were checking to make sure that I didn't have a heart attack, which I was like, that's a little strange because I did not have a heart attack, and I knew in my brain there's no way. So I didn't. They gave me fluids. They were confused with my case per usual. And they sent me home. And so I got a little bit better, but not. And I was not sleeping. I kept dropping weight. I was getting skinnier and skinnier. At this point, I started to look like skin and bones sort of, and like malnourished. And so I went home, and my parents were shocked at what they saw. And they said, you're not going back down to Florida. And so I was like, no, I am going back down to Florida. And in between that, they were looking for a new doctor because we all knew I was definitely not diagnosed with the right thing. So we end up finding a doctor that we've known of, and he was really good. And so he took one look at me and he said, no, you're about like 5 seconds away from the hospital, like literally about to admit me. And I said, no, I can do this at home. I'm not going into the hospital. I'm not doing it. And so I was being tough, obviously. And so he had started to change my medications. We knew I was misdiagnosed with the wrong thing. And I went back down to Florida. And at this point, I was giving myself injections of Toradol, which is like a very strong Motrin. And I learned how to do it in my dorm on FaceTime. And I, at that point, had to give it to myself like all of the time. And you can only have so much of it because it is so strong and it hurts your stomach. And it can really like impact, obviously, your stomach, give you ulcers, whatever. So I somehow dragged myself through formal because I wasn't going to miss a party. That's who I was. Even when I was not good, I still was like, I'm not missing a party. Do you understand? So I went back down and I did that. I still looked really sick. I was really thin. And then I made it to the end of the semester, and while I was taking a test for economics, I started to go blind. Literally. Everything was blurry. I could not read my test, so I failed my test. And I was telling my parents, I can't see, like, I can't read. Everything is super blurry. And so they sent me to this eye doctor down in Florida, and I really, no offense, if you're chronically ill, don't believe Florida is the best place to get health care for that. And this doctor wanted to do surgery on my eyes. Turns out I did not need that surgery, and thank goodness I did not get it. And so we kept going on. I actually had a doctor down in Florida who was like a regular doctor, like a PCP, and also a rheumatologist. And so she decided to test me for autoimmune diseases. And one of the first things you get tested for I'm blanking on it right now. What is it called? Oh, the ANA. And if your ANA is positive, you have an autoimmune disease. It turns out I got my blood work back when I was back home. And I don't know if this was spring break or if this was the summer, but at some point, and my ANA came back positive. And that was terrible news, but it was also great news because now we have something to work with because we didn't have much to work with before. So when I was seeing my doctor that we switched to, that was the really good one, and told me that I was about to be in the hospital. He's had so much experience with people that have complex autoimmune diseases. So the first thing he did for me was take me off all the medication that I was prescribed before, since technically I was being poisoned, and that's why I was going blind, and that's why my tongue was a mess, and that's why my throat was in my chest. And so I started to feel better in that aspect, but my headache was still so bad. I was still taking Toradol. This is about between the summer of sophomore and junior year. Oh, and sorry, I'm going all over the place, but before we move into that, at the end of spring break, remember how I just said I failed my economics test? Well, the professor told me if I don't take my final, he's going to fail me for the entire class. And I tried to explain to him I could not physically take the test because I couldn't see, and also I was really sick and couldn't come back down to take the test. And is there anything else I can do? Like, I feel like this really is not fair because this is something that I can't control. And he gave me, no, he said, you're going to fail then. And so I failed economics. And that was the first class I've ever failed in my entire life. But going back to after that to summer, I was working with my doctor. We started switching up medications. I had some terrible side effects, and some of them I had to literally just ride through because we strongly believed that medication was going to work. And I went through a lot of them with that, and they didn't work. And then a few did work. And so during that summer, still having migraines every day. I was still taking Toradol. We went on a trip down to Florida, and I remember I was in Disney World in Epcot, and I had to go into the bathroom and give myself these Toradol shots to make it through the full day because I was like crying. It was awful. I could not, I just kept pushing myself, obviously. And so by the end of the summer into junior year of college, my headache was dissipating. And at one point, I can't remember exactly what month, but into the fall, I finally had my first headache day free. 3 years later, after it started, October 1st, 2014. I had my first. You don't even understand how amazing that was. And so I started having more headache-free days, and I could use less of the Toradol. We were starting to get some of my medications right because, again, this doctor is so smart. And I was having some trouble with stuff. Like socially, I was really tired because now I wasn't on Adderall, and so I couldn't go out as much as I was going out and socializing and stuff. But I was also just like super happy that I was starting to feel a little bit better. The thing I hated most was that I was starting to gain weight because with my story, my weight goes up and down like a roller coaster. It's insane. But anyways, I slowly started to gain weight, and I was pleading with my doctor saying, please, you don't understand. I have to come off some of these meds that are making me gain weight. And he looked at me and he said, okay, which do you prefer? Do you want to have a headache the rest of your life and be miserable and skinny? Or do you want to be headache-free, happy, living life, and a little chunky? And so I said, no, I want both. And obviously that didn't work out for me, but I was still on the meds because I was not about to go back to have another migraine for years. And so I started to gain that weight, and I was trying at this point to change my diet, and also we were trying to figure out which foods trigger me the most with headaches. But then I told him, you know what, my stomach is bothering me all of the time. It hurts so bad. I'm going to the bathroom a lot. It's not normal. And he said, okay, let's do the elimination diet. So I went without dairy for a while. That didn't change anything. I went without nuts, like all of them, tree nuts, peanuts, everything. That made a huge change. So I no longer could have nuts, and I loved peanut butter. And then the biggest change, sorry, I keep shaking the camera. The biggest change was the fact that we found out gluten was the absolute devil for me. So no more gluten, and oh my God, I loved everything that had gluten in it. And I was pretty upset at first, but now that I've been doing it for so long, it phases me sometimes, but then it really doesn't. And so we knew, okay, I have to be gluten-free now and nut-free. And now that takes away a lot of different foods, but I'm okay. And so time was going on. Junior year, he had referred me to a gastroenterologist because at first I ended up having a endoscopy and colonoscopy with, or maybe it was just one of them, with another GI doctor that didn't specialize in what I ended up having. So I think he did the endoscopy. They saw like sores in my throat and inflammation and just all this stuff. And then I had my colonoscopy with the doctor that I was referred to. Great, hang on. Okay. Sorry, my mom was calling me about something that was so random. But I started seeing this doctor. The guy that did my colonoscopy happened to be a GI doctor that dealt with Crohn's. And turns out I have Crohn's, but I have a very complicated case of Crohn's. I don't know how much I'm going to get into right now, but just know that I have a pretty bad case of Crohn's. I started a new medication for that Crohn's called Remicade, and it was life-changing. It helped me so much with my GI symptoms. I was now at the point where I was only struggling mostly with fatigue. And to this day, I'm still struggling with it big time. But another thing they figured out after I got diagnosed with Crohn's was I was telling them my heart rate is high, I'm dizzy all the time, I feel like I'm going to pass out, and I was diagnosed with POTS after I did a tilt table test, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and it has to do with, ooh, are you okay, buddy? I have a puppy and he was trying to jump up on the couch. It has to do with the way your blood rushes to your brain or doesn't when you are sitting and standing and like in between or laying down, like getting up, and you kind of like you kind of black out, sort of, if that makes sense. So I started doing Gatorades all the time because I needed all the salt I could get to keep the fluids going in me and less dizzy. So at this point, I'm at senior year. I start dropping weight again. I'm happy. I feel better. I don't have a migraine. I am struggling big time with fatigue. but life is better. And so after I graduated, and I graduated with really good GPA for what I had been through, and gosh, it was a relief. I started my first job, and it was really difficult, and I was in the wrong job, and so I ended up leaving, but I was working full-time but barely surviving it. And so then it took me a while to find something else, and in between that, obviously I was still struggling because still sick, but I finally found something. I did a tiny internship, and then after that I got my next job, and I was working full-time. And at this point, like, I was still doing okay, and the pandemic was about to start. And so once it started, I had to be isolated because my Crohn's medication is an immunosuppressant, meaning that my immune system gets weaker because it's suppressing it since it's in overdrive all the time. And so I was home all of 2020, most of 2021, and I was feeling isolated, and it was just an awful experience. I started rapidly gaining weight from Remicade, which was on my side at first, but now it hated me. And I was getting worse and worse and worse. I ended up quitting my job. My disease was just ever changing, and at this point, I needed to change my Remicade, and I switched to Stelara, and that was doing the trick for a little bit. But for me, like, these medications don't last 8 weeks, they last 4 weeks. And so I finally, after insurance finally agreed, I was getting Stelara every 4 weeks. Things were okay, I was still struggling, and then the Stelara lasted maybe a year, and it really stopped working. And so that brings us to about maybe it worked 2 years, 2023. And last year in 2023, I kept going downhill. And at this point, I had to be in the hospital, or else things were just going to continue to fall apart. I could not function, leave my house, take care of like the stuff around my house. It was terrible. And so I got enrolled into this pain management clinic inpatient for 3 months. And I got my new medication for Crohn's called Skyrizi. But that was a huge fight for about 3 weeks, because Skyrizi is $38,000 a dose. And you know how many doses I needed? I needed a dose every 8 weeks. And so I started Skyrizi, and I also they pushed you to start to like move again in PT and go to groups and all this kind of stuff to learn how to deal with chronic illness. And I was there from July 10th, 2023 to October 2023. I don't remember the exact date. But at this point, I was actually making friends, because there were a lot of people my age that ended up in there for a lot of the same reasons, and also different, like, had different symptoms and different diagnosis and everything. And so I was making friends. I was getting better. I finally got my few doses of Skyrizi, and I was starting to feel better. I was walking about 2 miles a day because I had nothing else to do, because it was a sometimes very boring environment. And so I got to go home after a while, and I was so happy. I thought, you know what, this is great. I'm going to be feeling 1,000,000 times better than I've ever felt before. And then I didn't. And this was about November, December-ish, I started getting pretty bad again because A, I couldn't have Skyrizi every 4 weeks, and B, I was getting a higher dose in the hospital than the maintenance doses. So at this point, before that, when they were trying to switch me over to Skyrizi, sorry, I forgot to mention this, I got put on methotrexate. And if you know what methotrexate is, it's chemotherapy, and it's also an immunosuppressant. My hair started falling out. I was really upset about it. It was making me sick 5 out of 7 days a week where I couldn't do anything. And so I was on that until about November, when everything just kept getting worse and worse. And then in December, my doctor finally took me off methotrexate. I was getting better again. Still struggling after 4 weeks into Skyrizi. The first 4 weeks are great, and then the next 4 are the worst. And then recently, I've been declining again with certain things. Other ways, I'm a lot better than I was last year still. But now I had just started Imuran, which is another chemotherapy, and it's an immunosuppressant too. I've noticed my hair is starting to fall out a little bit. Hopefully it'll just thin and not completely fall out. I can't tell whether the Imuran is working yet because it really is supposed to take a while before you can tell. I'm really tired again, like way tired compared to when I left the hospital. The 4 weeks, like after the first 4 weeks, are awful for me. But I decided to make lemons into lemonade, and this is how I've been coping. I have started a chronic illness group called Chronically Chill. We have over 200 members, and every week I make a meeting with them, whether it be about a topic that we all can relate to that's a struggle, or game nights or happy hour. So it's a lot of fun, and people are from all over the world. So anyone can join, and I will put the link in the description. It has been my most, something that I'm extremely proud of, because, besides it helping people and me getting the messages that they're so thankful for it, it just feels fulfilling, and I feel like I found my purpose. And despite me not feeling well, and despite me struggling, I show up to that all of the time pretty much. And then I also run a brunch group, which is a mixture of like healthy people, and it's just socializing. But this has, me running the support group has made me realize I'd really love to become a life coach. So I'm studying right now to become a life coach, and I hope to use this YouTube channel as a way to teach people different things that I learn, and just change your mindset, and even just like celebrate the little wins, just a mixture of a lot of things. So that is where my life is now. I know it's been crazy. I've had other symptoms of different things. I now have fibromyalgia. I have what they think is small fiber neuropathy, and there's just so much that's out there that hasn't been studied enough, and I hope in my lifetime that things can change, and will be a medicine that'll work for me, and I won't have to struggle, because 10 years has been a very long time to struggle. And I know there are people out there that have it way worse than me, obviously, but it's all about making lemons into lemonade, and I'm trying to find my purpose. And I've done a lot of other fun things that I'll share in a different video, but this was just my chronic illness story to the best of my ability. I have brain fog, so I was going back and forth when I started remembering things, but obviously I didn't remember everything. But if you liked this video, please let me know. If you have any ideas or things you want to hear about that chronically ill people go through, also let me know. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for staying with me and watching my entire first long video on YouTube. And I hope to see you again soon. Bye!